Monday night in Indianapolis was supposed to be a routine blowout. The Indiana Fever were crushing the Phoenix Mercury, and with 7 minutes left on the clock, the game was already decided. Then something snapped, a shove, a pile of bodies, 5 technical fouls handed out in seconds, and a player got ejected from a game her team was winning by 19 points. But this wasn't random chaos. This was months of tension finally boiling over, a clash between two franchises with unfinished business, a player forced out of town returning to face her former team, and a rising star at the center of it all. The final score was 86-70, but that's not even close to the whole story. What actually happened that night reveals something far bigger about the WNBA, about rivalries that cut deeper than wins and losses, and about the pressure building around one of the league's brightest young talents. Let's start with the moment that changed everything. Ma'Sha Hinz-Allen was standing on the sideline, her team up by 19 points, and the game was essentially over. There were still 7 minutes on the clock, but Indiana had control. Phoenix was buried. The Mercury were down to their last gasps, and everyone in the building knew it. Then the whistle blew. Bonner and Clark got tangled up fighting for position in the paint. These two weren't strangers bumping shoulders in a routine play. This was a moment loaded with history, with tension, with months of bad blood sitting right beneath the surface. The altercation started small. Clark and Bonner exchanged words, but within seconds, we're talking literally seconds, half the floor erupted. Sophie Cunningham, Indiana's self-appointed enforcer, stepped right in. Alyssa Thomas rushed over to back up her girlfriend, Dana Bonner, and then Hinz-Allen jumped into the pile. The officials had to untangle the whole mess, and when they finally got everyone separated and went to the monitor, they handed out 5 technical fouls in a single sequence. Clark got 1, Cunningham got 1, Bonner got 1, Thomas got 1, and Hinz-Allen got 1. That first technical for Hinz-Allen was significant because it put her on notice. One more and she was gone. 8 seconds later, she got her second one. She shoved Bonner, the whistle blew, and Hinz-Allen was ejected from a game her team was winning by almost 20 points. Let that sink in for a second. You're up 19, your team has the win locked down, and you're so fired up that you're willing to get yourself thrown out of the game. That's either the most passionate display of team loyalty imaginable, or it's an incredibly dumb decision made in the heat of the moment, possibly both. The financial hit was real too. Clark's 5th technical of the season earned her a $1,000 fine and a warning letter from the league. Cunningham's 3rd technical cost her $500, and Hinz-Allen, along with Bonner and Thomas, were all looking at fines for their roles in the altercation. But here's what's wild, none of that mattered to anyone in the moment. The money didn't cool anybody down, the ejection didn't settle things. If anything, it added fuel to a fire that was already burning hot. What made this sequence so explosive wasn't just the physical contact, it was the context. Bonner had forced her way out of Indiana early in the season after just 9 games. She was now wearing a Phoenix uniform, and she was in a relationship with Alyssa Thomas, one of the Mercury's stars. Clark and Bonner already had history from a physical 2024 playoff series that had left scars. So when these two got tangled up, it wasn't just about that single possession. It was about everything that had come before: the forced exit, the new relationship, the playoff battles, the rivalry that had been building for months. The Indiana crowd had been booing Bonner all night. They hadn't forgotten her departure, they let her hear about it constantly. And when Hinz-Allen stepped in, when she shoved Bonner and got herself ejected, the home crowd erupted. Whether it was justified or not, whether it was smart or reckless, it was the moment that defined the entire evening. 1 shove, 1 ejection, and suddenly a game that should have been forgotten was now the biggest story in the WNBA. But there's way more to understand about how we got here. Before we talk about what happened in that 4th quarter, we need to go back to the beginning, because the first quarter of this game was absolutely catastrophic. Indiana didn't just play badly, they played historically badly. The Fever scored 6 points. 6. They shot 2 for 18 from the field and trailed by 13 after the opening 12 minutes. Bleacher Report called it one of the ugliest quarters of the entire WNBA season. And when you're talking about a franchise with Indiana's history, that's not an exaggeration, that's a genuine indictment. But here's the detail that makes it even worse. Alyssa Thomas by herself outscored the entire Fever team in that opening quarter. 1 player, 9 combined team points. Think about what that means. The home crowd was sitting in stunned silence. The most exciting moment in the first 12 minutes might have been Tyrese Halliburton, a pacer, not even a Fever player, reaching in to free a ball that got stuck behind the backboard. That's how bad it was. There was nothing, no rhythm, no flow, no life, just complete dysfunction on both ends of the floor. Caitlyn Clark was scoreless and got subbed out in the opening 6 minutes. She was watching from the bench as her team got completely outplayed. The building was deflated. The Phoenix Mercury looked like they were on their way to an easy road victory. Nobody in that arena could have predicted what was about to happen. Then the second quarter started, and it was like someone flipped a switch. Indiana dropped 35 points. 35, same building, same roster, completely different team. That wasn't luck. That wasn't just hot shooting on a cold night. That was head coach Stephanie White making defensive adjustments that absolutely choked off Phoenix's driving lanes and forced the Mercury into low-percentage shots for the rest of the night. And the engine of that turnaround was Clark. She came back into the game and started playing like she was on a mission. She poured in 15 of her 24 points in the second quarter alone, a run of threes that were pulled from the parking lot. Downhill drives that shifted the entire momentum. Quarterback passes to open teammates. She flipped a 13-point hole into a lead before halftime. The Fever went from looking completely lost to looking like legitimate contenders, and it happened because one player decided to take over. Her final line read 24 points on 8 of 17 shooting, 3 of 10 from deep, 9 assists, and 3 rebounds in 29 minutes. She finished 1 assist shy of a double-double, which became its own controversy later. But what mattered in this moment was that she had dragged her team out of a hole so deep that most teams never recover. Kelsey Mitchell added 22 points. Monique Billings gave Indiana a quiet double-double on the glass, but there was no confusion about the pecking order. When the Fever needed somebody to drag them, it was Clark, every single time, and that second quarter proved why she's become the most important player on this roster. Here's where things get interesting, and also where a lot of fans online went in a completely different direction. Late in the third quarter, Caitlyn Clark got pulled from the game. Kelsey Mitchell started getting buckets, and almost immediately a narrative started spreading online that something shady was happening, that the coaching staff was benching Clark, that they were sabotaging her, that Stephanie White was holding back the franchise player for some mysterious reason. The story spread fast, and it deserved a straight answer. Let's actually look at what happened, because this kind of conspiracy thinking can poison a fan base and create problems that don't need to exist. Clark played 29 minutes. She sat at the very end with about a minute and 15 seconds left in a game Indiana already had firmly in hand. That late substitution, that's the reason she came up one short of the double-double. That's the only reason, 1 assist away. And if you want a legitimate gripe about bench management, that's the one. But resting your franchise player in the closing minute of a comfortable win 2 nights before you face the exact same opponent again isn't a conspiracy, it's load management. Think about the context. Indiana was about to play Phoenix again on Wednesday night. 2 games in 2 nights, that's a grind. That's the kind of schedule where you protect your best players' legs and their energy levels. It's not complicated. It's not sinister, it's smart basketball operations. Teams do this all the time in the NBA, and they do it in the WNBA too. When you've got a 19-point lead and a minute and 15 seconds left, you pull your star player to make sure she's fresh for the rematch. But here's where there is a legitimate conversation worth having. It's about how Stephanie White handles Clark's minutes and touches across a long season. That's fair game. That's a real discussion worth pursuing. How much are you going to lean on one player? How many possessions does she need to touch the ball? When do you rest her? These are questions that matter for player development and for long-term success. And they're questions that fans should be thinking about critically. The difference is between 2 competing claims. On one side, you've got people saying the coaching staff is sabotaging Clark, that they're actively trying to limit her impact, that there's some kind of hidden agenda. On the other side, you've got the reality of load management in professional sports. They're not the same thing. Only one of them lines up with what actually happened. Only one of them makes sense when you look at the numbers and the context. Clark is averaging a career-high 21 points and 8 assists per game this season. That assist number ranks 2nd in the entire league, trailing only Alyssa Thomas. She's been the engine of Indiana's entire offense. She's been the reason the Fever are competitive. And she's been the player her coaches rely on when the game is on the line. That's not sabotage. That's exactly what you'd expect from a coaching staff that understands their best player is also their most important player. The real question isn't whether White is holding her back, it's how to maximize her impact over the course of a long season without burning her out. Let's shift focus for a second and talk about something that might seem minor but actually matters more than most people realize. The broadcast put the announced crowd at 15,198 on Monday night, and if you watched the game, you could see empty seats scattered around Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Not everywhere, but scattered throughout, there were visible gaps. There were sections that weren't packed. For a team that's been driving record attendance and record television numbers for 2 straight seasons, that's worth paying attention to. Now, context matters here. This was a Monday night game. This wasn't prime time. This was against a Phoenix team buried near the bottom of the standings. This wasn't the kind of matchup that fills every arena it walks into. The Mercury are struggling. They're not a draw. They're not the type of opponent that gets families excited to come watch basketball on a work night. So a few thousand empty seats against a weak opponent on a weeknight doesn't erase 2 seasons of Clark-driven attendance records, but it's the kind of thing that people notice. And it's the kind of thing that matters because the Fever and the entire WNBA have built a significant part of their business case on the idea that Caitlyn Clark sells out every arena. Every single one. That's been the narrative. That's been the story that justifies the investment in marketing and broadcast deals and infrastructure. When that slips, even a little, even against a struggling opponent on a weeknight, people start asking questions. They start wondering if the novelty is wearing off. They start doubting whether this growth is sustainable. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. One Monday night with a few thousand open seats doesn't mean the story is over, but it does mean you need to keep watching the trend. It does mean that the Fever can't take their home attendance for granted. They can't assume that showing up is enough anymore. They've got to deliver entertaining basketball. They've got to give fans a reason to come to the building and bring their families. And here's where it gets interesting. The second half of this home and home is the real test. Same 2 teams are meeting Wednesday night, but now there's fresh ejections, 5 technicals, and all of this bad blood serving as the marketing hook. This isn't a routine rematch anymore. This is going to be must-watch television precisely because of what happened on Monday. The fans are going to come back, the energy is going to be different. And the league is going to have a chance to prove that these rivalries can drive viewership and attendance even with a struggling opponent. So yes, Monday's attendance was a blip. Yes, it's not a crisis. But yes, it's something the Fever need to be aware of as they build their long-term business model around one player. The good news is that Wednesday's rematch should provide a test case for whether the drama and the rivalry can bring people back to the building. The bad news is that if it doesn't, that's when the real conversation starts about whether this growth was built on a foundation that can sustain itself. Now let's talk about Dana Bonner, because whether she wants the role or not, she's the emotional center of everything that happened on Monday night. Bonner signed with Indiana before this season, lasted 9 games, then she forced her way out of town. She's now wearing a Phoenix uniform and she's in a relationship with Alyssa Thomas, one of the Mercury's best players. That combination of factors has made her the lightning rod for everything that's happening between these two franchises. The Indiana fans have not forgotten her departure. They let her hear about it all night. The booing started early and didn't stop. Every time she touched the ball, every time she ran up the court, every time she was visible on the floor, the home crowd let her have it. And at one point, a Mercury teammate publicly ripped those fans for booing her. Think about what that tells you. A Mercury player was so bothered by the treatment of Bonner that she had to defend her publicly. That's how intense the atmosphere was. You can interpret that situation however you like. You can say the fans have a right to boo a player who left the team. You can say loyalty matters and there should be consequences for forcing your way out. Or you can say it's cruel, that it's personal in a way that goes beyond basketball, and that the fans should treat her with respect regardless of how her departure went down. Both of those perspectives have validity, but here's the reality that matters for Wednesday's rematch. Every time these teams meet now, Bonner is going to be the lightning rod. That's not going to change. Wednesday is going to be louder, not quieter. The fans are going to be angrier, not calmer. And Bonner is going to be in the middle of it, whether she wants to be or not. She made a choice to force her way out. She made a choice to go to division rival, and now she's got to live with the consequences of those decisions. The complicated part is that Bonner is also a human being in a relationship with one of her teammates. Alyssa Thomas is her girlfriend, and she's got to work with her every single day. When the home crowd is booing Bonner relentlessly, Thomas is hearing it too. It affects her. It affects their ability to focus on basketball. It creates an environment where personal and professional lives are bleeding into each other in ways that aren't healthy. But that's the world these two players chose when they made the decisions they made. Thomas came into this relationship knowing that Bonner had recent history with Indiana. Bonner came into this situation knowing that returning to Indianapolis as a member of a rival team would be contentious. And now they both have to navigate a situation where they can't separate their personal relationship from the professional rivalry. That's going to be the undercurrent of Wednesday's rematch. That's going to be the thing that makes this game different from every other game these two teams might play. So when we talk about the ejection, when we talk about the technicals, when we talk about the bad blood between these franchises, we have to understand that Bonner is at the center of it. Not because she's the best player on the court, not because she's the villain in some larger narrative, but because her personal choices have created a situation where the basketball rivalry has taken on an emotional dimension that goes deeper than normal sports competition. Wednesday night, that's all going to come to a head again. Here's something that got buried under all the drama and the ejections and the conspiracy theories. Stephanie White made a coaching adjustment in the second quarter that absolutely changed the trajectory of this game. And it's the kind of thing that separates good coaches from great coaches. It's the kind of thing that explains why her team is winning when they probably shouldn't be. After that disastrous first quarter where Indiana scored 6 points and shot 2 for 18, White went back to the drawing board. She looked at what Phoenix was doing. She looked at how the Mercury were getting into the paint. She looked at where the Fever's defense was breaking down, and then she made a simple but devastating adjustment. She choked off the driving lanes, she forced the Mercury into situations where they had to shoot from the outside, and most importantly, she put Indiana in a position to win the rebounding battle and control the glass. When the second quarter started, everything changed. The Fever dropped 35 points and shot 10 for 18 from the field. Not because the players suddenly became better shooters, not because Phoenix suddenly forgot how to play defense, but because the coaching adjustment gave Indiana better looks, better spacing, and better flow on the offensive end, and defensively it completely disrupted what the Mercury were trying to do. Alyssa Thomas was still excellent with 19 points and 9 assists. That's a phenomenal night. Kayla Copper chipped in 20, but the Mercury couldn't knock down a three-pointer when it counted. And once that paint got closed off, Phoenix had no answer at all. They couldn't drive, they couldn't kick out to open shooters, they were stuck in a situation where every possession was a struggle. That's the quiet headline of Monday's game. It wasn't just Clark going nuclear in the second quarter. It was a coaching adjustment that turned one of the worst defensive stretches of the season into a clinic. It was Stephanie White proving that she understands the game at a level that puts her in position to compete against anybody. It was one coach outmaneuvering another coach in real time, and the entire momentum of the game shifted as a result. Here's what's important about understanding this. When people look back at this game and they see the final score and they see Clark's stats and they see the ejection, a lot of them are going to miss the fact that White earned the win on the sideline. She made the adjustments that mattered. She put her team in position to win, and then her players executed. That's how basketball actually works at the highest level. It's not just about individual talent, it's about coaching, it's about schemes. It's about making your opponent uncomfortable and forcing them into situations they don't want to be in. The Fever are 10-7 right now and trending upward. They snapped a 2-game losing streak on Monday. And a lot of that is because White is getting better at making these kinds of adjustments. She's learning, she's growing, she's figuring out how to maximize her roster's strengths and minimize their weaknesses. That's what great coaching looks like, that's what sustainable success looks like, and that's going to be the real test on Wednesday when these teams meet again. Can White make adjustments twice in 2 nights? Can she stay one step ahead of the Mercury's coaching staff? That's the actual basketball question that matters. Let's zoom back in on Caitlyn Clark's performance on Monday night because it tells a story that goes way beyond the box score. Her night was a study in contrast. She was completely invisible in one quarter and absolutely dominant in another. She was pulled late in a game that was already won. And through it all, she revealed something important about what this team needs from her and how much pressure she's carrying. In that opening quarter, the one where Indiana scored 6 points total, Clark was scoreless. She got subbed out in the opening 6 minutes because she couldn't find any rhythm. She couldn't get comfortable. The team around her was playing so badly that there was nothing for her to work with, no open teammates, no flow, no way to generate offense. She was stuck on the sideline watching her team get completely outplayed. That's the worst version of Caitlyn Clark. But then she came back in the second quarter and it was like watching a different player altogether. She stacked 15 points on the board in 12 minutes. She was pulling threes from the parking lot. She was driving downhill and creating space. She was making quarterback passes to open teammates. She was doing everything. And she was doing it with urgency, with purpose, like she understood that her team needed her to save them, because they did. That contrast is important because it tells you something about Clark's impact on this team. When she's not on the court, when she's not engaged, the Fever look completely lost. They look like a team without direction. They look like they don't know how to score, and when she is on the court and she's playing well, everything changes. The offense flows, the spacing opens up, the opportunities are there for other players. She's the engine that makes everything work. Her final numbers were 24 points, 9 assists, 3 rebounds in 29 minutes. She shot 8 of 17 overall and 3 of 10 from 3. Not spectacular numbers necessarily, but in the context of her team's performance, they tell a complete story. She was the most important player on the floor. She was the one who dragged her team out of a hole so deep that most teams never recover. And she did it in 29 minutes without needing to play the entire game. Here's where it gets complicated though. She's averaging a career-high 21 points per game this season and 8 assists per game. That assist number ranks second in the entire league behind only Alyssa Thomas. That means she's touching the ball constantly. That means she's making decisions on every possession. That means she's carrying an enormous amount of responsibility for this team's success. And at some point, you have to wonder about the long-term impact of that kind of workload. Kelsey Mitchell adding 22 points is great. Monique Billings giving Indiana a double-double on the glass is important, but there's no confusion about the pecking order. When the Fever needs somebody to drag them to victory, it's always Clark. Every single time, and that's both the team's greatest strength and their biggest vulnerability. Because what happens if she gets tired? What happens if she gets injured? What happens if she has an off night and there's nobody else on the roster who can step up and carry the team? That's the real question that Wednesday's rematch is going to help answer. Can the Fever win without leaning entirely on Clark's genius? Can they prove they're more than just a one-player team? Because if they can't, then Monday's game becomes a sign of something bigger. A team that's talented but ultimately limited by how much they're asking one player to do. Wednesday night is going to be completely different from Monday night. Same 2 teams, same building, but an entirely different energy and an entirely different set of circumstances. And understanding what's at stake is crucial to understanding why this rematch matters more than you might think. Let's start with what happened Monday. There was an ejection, there were 5 technical fouls. There's bad blood between these franchises that didn't exist before. Dana Bonner forced her way out of Indiana and is now back wearing a rival uniform. Caitlyn Clark and Bonner have history from a chippy 2024 playoff series, and on Monday night, all of that tension finally boiled over in a way that nobody could ignore. The fines are coming. The league has already confirmed that. Clark and Cunningham are definitely getting hit with fines. Bonner, Thomas, and Hines Allen are all expected to face financial consequences too, but here's the thing. Those fines don't cool anybody down. If anything, they add fuel to a fire that's already burning hot. A Mercury team that just got embarrassed on the road is going to walk into Indianapolis with something to prove. They lost a player to an ejection. They listened to the home crowd booing Bonner for 2.5 hours, and they got completely outcoached in the second half. They're not going to forget that. They're not going to come in on Wednesday wanting to let it slide. The question that hangs over everything is how the officials are going to manage the game. Because with this much friction between 2 rosters, how the refs handle things is going to matter as much as anything either team does on the court. A tightly called game keeps a lid on it. The officials make sure everything stays within boundaries. They set a tone early that physical play will be punished, and they stick to it. That keeps players from getting into situations where they're going to be tempted to escalate. But a loosely called game with this group could get away from everybody in a hurry. If the officials let things slide, if they're inconsistent, if they're not clear about what they're going to tolerate, then Monday's tension could transform into something uglier. Players are going to test boundaries, they're going to push limits, and once one thing happens, everything else spirals. That's how these situations develop, that's how Monday's altercation happened, and that's how Wednesday could go wrong. Then there's the Bonner factor, which we've already touched on but deserves to be reinforced. She's the emotional center of this rivalry, whether she wants to be or not. Every time these teams meet, she's going to be the lightning rod. Wednesday is going to be louder, not quieter. The crowd is going to be angrier, not calmer, and every possession she's involved in is going to have an extra layer of tension. That's the reality of the situation she's created. Structurally, the basketball questions are interesting too. Can Phoenix adjust to what White did to them in the second half? Can they find ways to get into the paint or create open three-point looks without relying entirely on what Alyssa Thomas can create? And can Indiana keep the same defensive intensity without wearing out their key players before the playoffs? These are real basketball questions. But honestly, they're almost secondary to the broader narrative. Wednesday night is about whether this rivalry has turned into something real or whether Monday was just a one-time blow-up. Is this the beginning of something that's going to define these two teams' relationship for the rest of the season? Or is it a moment that both sides will move past and refocus on basketball? That's what we're going to find out. And that's why Wednesday night matters so much more than any regular season game between a 10-7 team and a 5-13 team has any right to matter. The basketball is secondary. The story is everything, so here's the real question that I want you to answer in the comments, and you have to pick a side because you can't have it both ways. Was Maisha Hins-Allen right to step in and get herself ejected, defending her teammates and sending a message that nobody bullies Caitlyn Clark inside Indiana's building? Or did she cost her team and her own wallet for nothing in a game that was already over? One of those perspectives is leadership. The other is throwing away a 19-point lead for an empty gesture. Tell me which one you actually saw, because your answer says something about how you view basketball loyalty, about what matters in professional sports, and about whether principle ever outweighs pragmatism. Wednesday's rematch is coming. The tension is still there, and everything that happened Monday is going to echo through that second game. Subscribe right now so you don't miss the breakdown the second that game ends.